History can often be strange, full of twists and turns with unexpected stories along the way. Some parts of history are unknown to the world and have creepy twists that you'd never expect. 5. Violet Jessup. The story of Violet Jessup is just one example of the strange stories from history that are out there waiting to be discovered. Violet was born in Argentina to Irish immigrant parents in 1887. From the get-go, Violet's life was a constant game of survival, a pattern that continued well into her adulthood. During the first years of her life, she contracted tuberculosis and was extremely unwell. The doctors warned her parents that it would likely take her life. However, Violet defied the odds and survived, going on to live a happy and healthy life. When Violet was just 16 years old, her father passed away and the family moved to England in hopes of having a better life. Catherine, Violet's mother, worked as a stewardess aboard commercial ships whilst Violet took care of her younger siblings. Violet admired her mother's profession, and after leaving school, she got a job as a stewardess, proudly following in her mother's footsteps. Little did Violet know that this job would take her on a whirlwind journey and lead to one of the greatest survival stories in history. In 1910, Violet began working on the RMS Olympic, something that she was extremely proud of given that the ship was the largest civilian ship at the time. For the first year, everything went swimmingly. Violet enjoyed her job and was looking forward to the future. Then on September 20th, 1911, Violet's life was changed in an instant. On that day, the RMS Olympic crashed with the HMS Hawk in a freak accident. No one was fatally injured, and the ship made it back to Southampton without sinking. This incident had shaken Violet. She refused to talk about it with anyone, and even declined to talk about it in her memoirs. She continued working on the RMS Olympic for another year. It appears that whilst the incident had shaken her, it hadn't put her off being a stewardess on a ship. Violet had already survived one boat crash. Surely she wouldn't be so lucky a second time around? That's where you'd be wrong. On April 10, 1912, Violet proudly boarded the RMS Titanic. She had no idea that her dream job was about to turn into a living nightmare. As we know, on April 14, 1912, the RMS Titanic hit an iceberg and sank in the North Atlantic Ocean. In an unbelievable plot twist, Violet survived the sinking of the Titanic by jumping onto a lifeboat. This lifeboat was later found by search crews, and all of those aboard were taken to New York City. Shortly after arriving in New York City, Violet went back home to Southampton, shaken but undeterred from sailing the seas. For years after the sinking of the Titanic, Violet joined the British Red Cross and worked on the HMHS Britannic, which had been converted from a commercial liner into a hospital ship during World War I. Mysteriously, the HMHS Britannic also sank on November 21, 1916. Historians and scientists are still unsure as to what caused the event to happen. As the event unfolded, stewardesses, patients, and other staff members began jumping into lifeboats, desperately trying to survive. In her memoirs, she wrote, "The white pride of the ocean's medical world dipped her head a little, then a little lower and still lower. All the deck machinery fell into the sea like a child's toys. Then she took a fearful plunge, her stern rearing hundreds of feet into the air until with a final roar, she disappeared into the depths." Violet barely survived the sinking of the HMHS Britannic, and it wasn't until a year later that she discovered she had suffered a fractured skull. Even after being involved in 3 ship incidents, Violet continued to work as a stewardess aboard cruise liners and large ships. Many considered her the luckiest woman in the world, and she even picked up the nickname of Miss Unsinkable. Violet passed away in 1971 at the age of 83. Whilst she is no longer with us, her story of survival lives on. https://allthat'sinteresting.com/unsinkable-violet-jessup https://what-they-think-is-the-real-life-plot-twist-in-history https://www.encyclopedia-titanica.org/titanic-survivor/violet-constance-jessup.html https://www.nationalarchives.gov.uk/titanic/stories/violet-constance-jessup.htm https://www.irishcentral.com/roots/history/violet-jessup-disasters. 4. Mithridates 6 Mithridates 6, also known as Mithridates, myth Rih dates. The Great ruled over the kingdom of Pontus between 120 BC and 63 BC. Mithridates was very aware of the events going on around him and began noticing that the Roman Empire were especially fond of taking out. He believed that to save himself from being poisoned, he needed to ingest small amounts of poisons each day so that his body would become immune to them. During his many years of research, he also discovered Antidotum Mithridaticum, aka Antidote of Mithridates, by mixing various herbs. Unfortunately for Mithridates, he was right. His years of exposing himself to toxins had made him immune, and in a bizarre twist, it actually led to his death. Mithridates fought against many Roman generals between 88 BC and 65 BC, and he finally met his match in Pompey the Great. Pompey and his army were far too strong for Mithridates, and were able to easily defeat him. Not wanting to be captured or go down in history as a loser, Mithridates began swallowing different poisons. However, his years of exposure meant he had built up a tolerance. His years of paranoia and research had finally turned on him in a way he never expected. After this failed attempt, he ordered his servants to use a sword to seal the deal. https://www.asmalldoseoftoxicology.org/Mithridates https://www.merriam-webster.com/medical/meteoridatism #text =medical% definition %tough% meteoridatism gradually %increase %doses %up%it https://www.tandyfonline.com/doi/pdf/10.1080/1556365090 2899144 https://press.princeton.edu/books/paperback/9780691150260/the-poison-king https://www. Furious, and he plotted on how he could ensure that he would become the next king of Persia. One summer evening in 522 BC, Darius found himself in the palace of Bardia, the current ruler of Persia, and took the opportunity to seize what he saw as his. Darius took care of Bardia, but was caught in the act by servile magi who heard the commotion in the palace. When confronted, Darius explained that the man who lay before them was not King Bardia, but a shape-shifting wizard. He continued explaining that for an unknown period, this shapeshifter had taken over the throne whilst the real king was nowhere to be seen. He told them that as soon as he realized that the king was an imposter, he took it into his own hands to ensure that the imposter was removed. The Magi were in complete shock. They were unsure of what to think or do as they had never been confronted with such a strange situation before. They decided to hold a meeting and consult with one another on whether Darius was telling the truth. At this point, Darius' fate balanced in their hands, and he began to worry that he had taken things too far. Bizarrely, the Magi decided that Darius was in fact telling the truth because nobody would be able to lie about something like that. They could not comprehend that somebody would be calculating enough to concoct a story about a wizard imposter taking over from the king. Following their decision, Darius ascended to the throne and became known as Darius the Wizard Slayer. He ruled over Persia until his passing in 486 BC. 2. Yi Sun-sin. Yi Sun-sin is considered a national hero in Korea for his heroic and brave efforts against the Japanese invading forces in the 1500s. However, he wasn't always seen as a hero. In 1576, he joined the Korean army and vowed to fight for his country. At the time, Korea was fighting with Japan for control. The wars between Japan and Korea lasted for centuries until Korea was finally annexed by Japan in 1910 and then split into two countries following the Korean War. The constant threat of invasion from the Japanese was by no means a new concept to the Koreans, and they went to every effort to maintain their sovereignty and keep their dynasties. For the young men of Korea, this meant joining the armed forces and contributing to keeping their home safe. He passed the government-mandated exams to become a military officer with flying colors, and within months, he found himself stationed in Army and Navy positions. He flourished in the Army and was awarded medals and commendations by high-ranking officers. However, his brilliance didn't go unnoticed, and the superior officers above him became extremely jealous, fearing that he was making them look bad. In the 1580s, these superiors conspired against Yi, claiming that he had deserted during a battle. This accusation was taken very seriously, and Yi was stripped of his ranks and subjected to harsh physical punishment as well as imprisonment. After serving his time, he was determined to get back into the army and show his superiors that they had not beaten him. He was once again accepted into the Korean army, and just as he had done before, he quickly rose through the ranks and became commander. During his time as commander, he ensured that his troops were prepared for anything and ensured that he had the right tools and weapons on standby. Thanks to his preparations, the Korean army on the southern coast were able to hold off the invading Japanese and cut them off from the south, rendering them useless. Had he not rejoined the army and been made a commander, who knows what the outcome of that battle would have been. https://www.britishmuseum.org/collection/term/biog146497 https://archives/admiral-e-sun-turtle-ships-and-modern-asian-history https://britannica.com/biography/e-sun-shin https://www.jiangnam.go.k/e-sun-shin_index.jiang?? ***010204005000000 https://www.military-history.org/feature/early-modern/e-sun-greatest-admiral.htm 1. Black Death cats between 1346 and 1353. The Black Death swept across the world and claimed the lives of millions of people. The outbreak had a large toll on European populations, and it is a significant part of human history and epidemiological studies. The Black Death was spread by rats carrying infected fleas. These rats would hide away on boats before scurrying to land as soon as the boat had docked. But what if I told you that there is one animal who may have been able to help? An animal that history often neglects to mention for hundreds of years, but during the Black Death, their numbers were culled, which led to dire consequences for humans. Pope Gregory IX kicked off the anti-cat sentiment by proclaiming that they were diabolical due to their unruly nature and tendency to do whatever they pleased. Superstitious people believed that cats were a sign of the devil, whilst others disliked them due to their connection with witchcraft. The anti-cat movement gained so much traction that cats, along with their owners, were removed, and the cat population quickly dwindled. Whilst residents of Europe rejoiced that the evil cats were now gone, they failed to realize one key thing. Cats keep the rat population in check, and without cats, the rats were left to run free. The plague spread quicker as there were far fewer cats to catch them, and the population suffered greatly. It wasn't until much later that people began realizing that people who still owned cats seemed to be immune to the plague. That's when the penny finally dropped, and people began to realize that rats were the cause of the plague, and that cats weren't demonic after all. Demand for cats slowly began to rise, and ever since, cats have sat beside dogs as man's best friend.